Okay, so I think we are live on Zoom a minute early, so I'm just going to leave that backdrop up there. Just wait for a minute or two, just in case there are other folks who plan to join. And then we'll get started in just a bit. All right, so welcome back, everyone. So I think we're ready to get started. And just to, again, anchor ourselves a little bit, today we are going to be talking about universal cycles. This is the last section of, let's see, I believe this is the fourth chapter, yes. So this is the last of the discussions that we are going to have on this format, where you try to basically have a pre-ordered deck and you cut wherever, and the top few cards is supposed to give you enough information to get like a full read. So let me actually start by showing you the effect. So this actually has a trick, and again, I didn't find a very good way of animating it or creating an interactive experience with the trick. So I'm just going to turn my video on and show you my desk. And so the plan is that there's predominantly one performable trick in this section, and there's some speculation about a trick that actually doesn't involve a standard deck of cards. So what I'll focus on is the setup of the trick and how it works, the one that I think is performable. And again, I think there is really no, unlike the color pattern, I think the way they came up with the setup was kind of ad hoc approach. So it would be really nice if there is some systematic way of doing it. And the for the other discussion that they have, well, it turns out that there's some really nice combinatorial questions, but the trick itself is, it seems like a slightly contrived trick, as they seem to admit themselves. So we will probably end up not spending a whole lot of time on that, but I'll just tell you a little bit about what the premise is. So with that said, let's just get started with this one. Let me maybe spotlight my camera so that, yes, probably not a very high quality feed or anything, but somebody in the chat can confirm that you can see here a deck of cards. And as you know, it's a pre-ordered deck, but we will play along nevertheless. Okay, wonderful. I also need, I do need my screen to be showing me something to become clear in a minute. Okay. Okay. All right. So, yeah, some prayers to see and hope that this works. But okay, let me, yeah. So, the premise of this trick or the setup is very similar to many of the other ones that we have seen. So you have a pre-ordered deck, and you need to give this a cut as many times as you want. But one thing I will say is that I think there are a lot of sleet of hand based card tricks that revolve around pre ordered decks, where usually the trick is to look at the bottom card sneakily. And because you know that it's a pre ordered deck, if you've memorized it, if you know the bottom card, then you know the order. So I think what makes all of these tricks, this family of tricks here, impressive is that we really don't need to do this. Like this is genuine math driven trick where the deck can be with the audience and you may not have a chance to peek at anything and you'll still be able to make it. So you just have to trust me when I say that I'm not peeking anywhere, because we don't need to. And at some point you're going to have five people pull up the top five cards. And as you can see here, the card backs are of different colors, and that's because, just like the color pattern trick, here you're going to actually ask people to make groups based on their suits. Okay, so again, I don't want to peek at the cards. That's why I mixed and matched cards from four different decks. So when we actually perform this with volunteers, what's going to happen is actually, you don't even need to know which suits, but right now, what you're going to tell them is, so in this case, I actually have a little more information than I need. What you're going to tell them is people who have the same suit, please stand together. So they are going to form some groups, okay? Um, in this case, I actually know. So the blacks are the clubs, the reds are the hearts, the green are the spades, and the blues are the diamonds. So you don't see the blues, they're the diamonds. So I actually got another set of Uno cards just to explain what's happening. So this is going to be the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth spectator who have these cards. And the way they're going to group is the first, second, and fifth spectator will form one group. And the third and the fourth spectator is that they're going to stand separately as singleton groups, basically. Okay. So this is going to be 1, 2, 5, 3, and 4. That's going to be the grouping. Okay. And I claim that just from that information about the grouping, you can make a prediction of what all the cards look like. And let me see if we manage that. This, to be honest, has to be a table lookup for me because I haven't memorized anything. So this is going to be, I can, of course, try and pretend that I've memorized something. And when you perform this, of course, you should do like the appropriate banter. So you know, for example, that this, like I said, is a clubs. I can see the card back is black. It is going to be a 10 of clubs, I hope, if I did my lookup right. So it's a 10 of clubs. This is hearts, and this is again going to be 10 of hearts. And we're going to run into a hat trick of tens here. This I said is a spade, and it's a 10 of spades. And here we have two more spades, and this is 9 and 8 of spades. And you will see that the numbers are all very similar. And this was, as will become clear in a minute, this is because I was very lazy with how I set this up. You can set it up. Actually, in this case, the book does not give you a concrete ordering of the cards. They give you a skeleton based on which you can make up your own ordering. So the ordering that I made was the laziest possible ordering that you can come up with. So if you see a whole bunch of cards together at once, you'll find that, they're either very similar numbers or they come in a sequence or something like that. Okay. Um, Maybe I should just do that one more time to confirm that it wasn't a fluke. I don't know what are the odds of that whole thing being a fluke. Maybe not very high, but let me split the deck somewhere else. And let's see. So, okay. So I don't know if, again, maybe useful to say this is the first spectator, this is second, third, fourth, and fifth. This time you're going to get a different grouping, presumably cut at a different place. The idea is that every cut should give you a different grouping. So here we have 2 and 3 will stand together, 1 and 4 will stand together, and 5 will stand alone. Again, when you're performing this here, like I said, because of the way I've set up the card backs, I actually have more information than I will if I were to perform the trick in person. If you're performing in person, you just say people who have the same suit, go ahead and group together. you don't know which, like, 1 and 4 have the same suit, but you don't know which suit. So here I actually know because they're green card backs. I didn't know how to I didn't know how to avoid this situation, but you will actually have a little less information. And it turns out that little less information is actually still enough. So let's see if we can make a meaningful prediction here. So I'm going to predict. So like I said, the blues are the diamonds. We'll start from here. I'm going to predict that this is an 8 of diamonds. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so that's an 8 of diamonds. These two are the spades. I claim that this is ace and 2. Let's see if that works out. All right, so not so bad. And here we have hearts, and this is going to be 6 and 7, it turns out. So 6 and 7. Okay, so let me know if you find that the effect is clear. What you do is it's the standard setup. You have a rigged deck. You ask 5 people, cut as many times as you like. Ask 5 people to pick the top 5 and ask them to form groups based on when they share a suit. If they have the same suit, they go and stand together. So they might have a bit of a discussion amongst themselves for a bit. One thing that I imagine, so I've actually never performed this trick with actual people. This was the first time I actually read about it from this book. My guess is one thing that might happen is as people are discussing and regrouping, it may be easy to lose track of, which spectator was who. So the important thing for us is, and this is actually, okay, it's good that this came up because it's a corner case that I want to talk about for a second. But as people move around and group themselves, you might have to keep track of who was the first, who was the second, because that's the information that you really need. Okay. So this is, okay, so this actually is going to be an interesting grouping. 1 and 5 are both clubs. are, 2 and 3 are heart and spade. So they'll be singletons. 4 here, normally this is a blue card. I don't know if that's evident. It's blue. So normally it would have been a diamond. But actually, I've labeled this very explicitly as a joker, which we are going to treat as its own suit. And I'll come to why in a second. We are basically hoping that every possible grouping shows up exactly once, every possible grouping of 5 things into groups. Okay. And and the reason we have to introduce a joker as a special case is because there are only 4 suits. And if you want to see all possible groupings of 5 things into groups, all possible partitions, in particular, you're going to have a partition where everything is a singleton. And that means that you need 5 types. We don't have 5 types. So here, actually, this is a full deck, except that the king of spades has been swapped out for a joker so that we can actually see all the distinct groupings. I think it's pointed out that you could also work with a deck of 51 cards if you like, and so just get rid of that one grouping. But that one special grouping, which is also going to bring me to the fact that it's interesting to note that the number of groupings exactly 52, which allows us to pull off this trick. So that's the next point I was going to make. But just for kicks and a little bit of verification, let me just confirm that we can also predict this. So okay, so this, of course, has literally been labeled. So this we know is a joker. I was a little stingy and I only spoiled the back of an extra card, but let's pretend it's a joker. This one is going to be the queen of clubs, and this will be the jack of clubs. Okay, so this is because of my laziness and how I ordered these things. These could actually be totally random if you set it up in a more interesting way. This is going to be king of hearts. This is going to be the queen of spades. Okay. So again, this works, and if it's worked, if it's worked so far, this is not coincidence. So let's look at the math that's driving this trick. So, okay, before that, let me just take a pause for a second and ask if anybody has any questions about how the trick is set up, how the effect works, or is at least the why it works. We're going to come to in a second, but the fact that it works, or just like it's a rigged deck. You have to take the top five. And the main difference now, or the main thing that makes this trick its own, is the fact that it's based on this idea of grouping. So is the mechanics of that kind of clear? If not, feel free to just unmute and let me know if you have any comments. And maybe if Kapil, if you can give me a +1 as a signal that I can proceed, that would also work. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Anita. Okay, so basically we are working with groupings of 5 numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is like, I think, the standard thing that you will see in a combinatorics class. One of the questions, like you can ask how many orderings are there, you can ask how many subsets there are. So it's 5 factorial, 32. You can say how many, say, 3-sized subsets are there. That would be 5 choose 3. But another thing you can ask is how many ways of partitioning 5 objects into sets. Okay, you don't care about the ordering of these sets. You don't care about, like, the sets themselves are not, like, they're not tuples or sequences. So within a set, also you don't care about the order. So one thing would be, let's do it with 3 because it's just easier to see. So with 3, you could say, well, all the singletons, that's one way of doing it. Like to think of this as if there's a family of 3, which is, for example, my situation. Let's say if somebody is planning a surprise, okay, if somebody is to be surprised, then the other 2 gang up. So you could say 2 and 3 group to surprise 1, or 1 and 2 group to surprise 3, or 1 and 3 group to surprise 2. So that's 3 other ways that you could have groupings. So you can have this grouping, which is everybody is a loner, everybody is sitting in their own room. So that's singletons. You could have one group of size 2 and one singleton. You can do that in 3 ways. Or you could have everybody together. And I hope I didn't miss anything. So because you don't care about, so 2, 3, 1 versus like 1, 2, 3, these are the same thing. And here also, you don't care about the orders. So this is the same set. Okay, so essentially there are 5 ways of coming up with groupings of 3 things. Let me know if I missed anything. I think this is explicitly mentioned in the book as well. So yeah. So that's right. So there are 5 ways of doing this. So it turns out, curiously enough, it turns out that if you had 5 cards, or 5 things, and you thought about how many ways are there of grouping them, this number, this is called the Bell number of order 5 or whatever. This number turns out to be exactly 52. Okay? And again, this is not to be confused with things like partition numbers and things. As in partition, if you wanted partitions of 5, for example, 3 plus 2, there are partitions and ordered partitions. So 3 plus 2 would be a partition, but you wouldn't care about like which 3 and which 2. Whereas here, these would be like 2 distinct groupings. Okay, so just like we saw with 3, like 2 plus 1 shows up 3 times because there are 3 ways of isolating one card from the rest. Yeah. So, so it turns out that the Bell number of order 5 is exactly 52. And there's this very amusing quip in the book. Yeah, so the way they put it is, for years we have been intrigued by the numerical coincidence that B5 is 52, and we want to know what's the trick. So it seems like, well, if B5 is 52, it seems tempting to say that you have 52 signals that you can distinguish, and they actually encourage us, the readers, to think about, like, given that there are 52 ways of grouping 5 objects, like, can you come up with something? And the trick that we just saw in the beginning was what they came up with after a while. I think it's actually a nice question. Like, now that, of course, we know this trick, I think we're going to be heavily biased by it. But maybe, or at least that's how I feel. Maybe I shouldn't speak for others here. But this does seem to be like really nice. And now hopefully these corner cases make sense, because what you want is, yeah, so their point is when you cut the deck, you can ask people to group according to suits. And now the point is that there aren't 5 suits to group against. So so you will be able to see like almost all the groupings except for the one thing, because all groupings except for the one where everything is a singleton is like 4 groups, like because at least one of the groups is size at least 2. So for all of those other groupings, it's not a problem. So you could try to set things up so that you see all the 51 groupings, except for, and just work by dropping a card so that you only have 51 locations to cut. And that's one way of doing it. And the other way is to swap one of the cards with a joker. And that's what they do in the sequence that they suggest. So now that we know that this is the setup, the reason the setup has some hope of working is because this bell number matches with the size of a standard deck. And if we do this one swapping thing, we also account for seeing that special grouping, which is all singletons. So with all of this background, the only missing piece now is the question of what is the ordering of the deck, which has this property that at every cut you get a different signal when you read off the groupings into suits, right? So for example, like really bad orderings would be things like if you had a sorted deck, then you're just going to get like you're basically only going to get, I don't know exactly how many, but you'll probably you probably get about 10 or so different reads, because for the most part, actually not even that many, because as long as you're seeing all diamonds, all hearts, all spades, or all clubs, those reads are actually all the same, because we don't know, the reads are not labeled with the suits. So if I see 4 or 5 diamonds consecutively, the grouping corresponding to that is all the 5 cards of one group, right? And if I see all clubs together, then again, it's all, so if I see 5 consecutive clubs, that's again the same grouping. So in particular, one point is that if, let's say you start off trying to make the deck and you say, okay, let me put 5 diamonds together, because that's going to give me, so maybe let me just switch out to the camera again. So we're going to say, okay, one of the reads that we must see is like where everything is together. So it's one group and everything's together. So maybe we should just pull out cards that have the same suit. So you can pick your favorite suit. So let's say that's spades. So you can say, I'm going to start off my ordering with all spades. So if you cut the deck here, you're going to see like, these guys are going to form one group. So you've accounted for that read. Now, if the deck is cut with one card taken off, that's going to be one group of 4. And like, so 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be one group. And this 5th guy here, the next one, has to come from a different suit. It has to be something else. And you could try to sort of, greedily extend this, knowing that, okay, if I cut the second thing, it's going to be 1, 2, 3 going into one group. We want to see, well, now you have a few options for what happens next. So let's say you had spades followed by, I mean, now I'm only picking from one, whatever. So let's say 3 spades followed by a diamond. So I know it's 1, 2, 3. Now I could put in another diamond to get the grouping. So I've seen 2 groupings by now. I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, comma 5. Now I have the opportunity to see 1, 2, 3, comma 4, 5 if I put in another diamond. Or if I put in a heart or a club, I get to see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as singletons. If I follow this up with another spade, then I'm going to see 1, 2, 3, 5, and 4 as a singleton. So I actually have 3 options, like all 3, like all the suit extensions here would be valid. I could do another diamond, I could do another heart. Actually, whether I do a heart or a club, I will get the same grouping. I'm going to get 4 and 5 as singletons. So no matter which one of those I use, I get to see the same grouping. And if I do it with a spade, then I get to see a different grouping. So I can generate one of these three groupings depending on how I extend this. So I'm not sure if like a greedy mechanism for coming up with such a sequence will actually work. I can definitely think of a bunch of sequences which have a really poor entropy in terms of how many distinct signals they send out. It appears that the sequence that they actually finally came up with from the description in the book, it seems like they came up with it in a largely ad hoc fashion. And let me show you what they came up with. It's okay. So can you see this colorful sequence of 52 cards? So basically, this is the same. This is the same color coding that I used in the beginning. So the blues are all diamonds, the grays or blacks are clubs, the reds are hearts, and the greens are spades, and the yellow here is a joker. It's like the fifth suit. So this is for, like, if you do choose to memorize this deck, this is for practice so that you can see if you can predict what's happening. Again, I still have to clean this up. It's a little bit buggy, but this is essentially, so in the book, this is all the information that there is. So I can go back and show you the book. Yeah, so they say that using Hamiltonian cycles and a lot of hard work, we came up with this sequence, and they replace like one of the spades with a joker. And at this point, they say you're on your own from here. So the work that you have to do from here is actually turning this color pattern into a concrete sequence. And what I did was the reason I said what I did was very lazy was that I had I had from 4 different decks. From the red deck, I pulled out the hearts, arranged them in 1 to 13. From the blue deck, I pulled out the diamonds. From the black deck, I pulled out the clubs, and from the green deck, I pulled out the spades. So I had 4 decks, four sets of 13 cards. Of course, I removed the king of spades and replaced it with, like, I also had a joker. And then what I did was to create an actual deck of 52 cards for the trick. I basically just picked, so this said 5 diamonds. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to pick the first 5 diamonds. Then it's a club. So I picked a club. So basically, I picked whatever was on the top of the stack of each of these. So then I had to pick 3 hearts. So I went and picked the first 3 hearts and so on. So if I just had the sense to shuffle all of these 13 sized decks, I would have come up with a sequence that looked really random. But unfortunately, it started off with an ordered deck. So, it just ended up being it just basically ended up being something that when you reveal it, if you happen to get, if you happen to get a bunch of hearts or a bunch of spades together, they're always going to be in sequence, which is a little not so nice. So if you were to perform this trick, I would definitely recommend, like, you can set up the deck in pretty much the same way. In fact, if you are doing this, if you have to quickly assemble a deck, just in preparation for showing this trick, you could, in principle. So the tricky part about this is the retrieval, because just like with the color pattern sequence, I think the most impressive version of this trick is when you have the deck memorized. But here the memorizing involves not only remembering the deck, but also matching the group signature with the location of the cut. So from a performative point of view, what you actually see in front of you is a grouping. That also you have to be a little careful because people are moving around presumably, and you have to remember to keep track. Oh, that was the 5th guy, that was the 3rd guy, they're now together, whatever. So basically, yeah, I mean, you see the grouping. So you see something like, let's say, 1, 3 together, and then 2, 4, 5 are singletons, right? From this grouping signature, you have to, so each group corresponds to a cut in the deck. So in the group, you have to retrieve the cut. Of course, if you have the sequence memorized, once you have the cut, you have the whole thing. So that's fine. But you have 2 things to remember here: the sequence as well as the cut and grouping voila matching. So that's makes it performatively tricky. When I was showing you, the reason I was able to figure out the cards was because it set up a little calculator here where I could enter So this is just a JavaScript program, which, if you give it a grouping, so if you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that appears only once at the top of the deck, where it's, as you can see, it's all diamonds. Can be anything you want, but that appears at the top of the deck. So if you say find cards, in my stupid sequence, it was the first 5 diamonds. Ideally, when you're preparing your own deck, you work with some sort of a shuffle. It's actually, I think it's an interesting question to see if you can come up with a shuffle which makes for a sequence that's somehow a little easy to memorize in terms of especially the mapping of the groupings to the cuts, like to the cut numbers. So there are a lot of mnemonics that, so I think if I cut the deck at 32, this skeleton tells us what the grouping signature is. So if I cut the deck at 32 or whatever, the signature is going to be like 1, 2 is one group and 3, 4, 5 are singletons. So I don't know if there's a way of assigning cards, because you have a lot of flexibility in how you assign cards here. Actually, this tells you that just based on this skeleton, I think, if I'm not wrong, it's basically the position of the joker is fixed. But other than that, it feels like 13 factorial times 13 factorial times 13 factorial times 12 factorial. It seems like you can take the skeleton and arrange the suits in whatever way you like, and all of those arrangements will basically respect this skeleton. So maybe you can come up with an ordering that's somehow easy for you to remember, perhaps in some way. I thought that would be kind of interesting to figure out. Of course, this one skeleton gives us so many orderings that work. Again, you could ask the counting questions here. In the book, they don't go into it at all, but you could ask how many sequences are there that have this property. So here, like once you have a skeleton, once you have a color skeleton or a suit skeleton that works, by a suit skeleton, I mean a pattern like this. It's a word over the alphabet A, S, D, C, J, with exactly 1 J, 12 spades, and 13 of the rest. So it's a 52 length word over this alphabet. How many of these words have the property? Each of these words will give you many, many sequences. Each of these good words. So a good word is a word where, no matter where you cut, you get a different signal. So here, if you go to all the cuts and list out the groupings, you will see that you've generated all the 52 groupings. That's something that I verified by script. And then the script, of course, goes on to actually make the prediction for you. So one thing is, again, to make this performatively feasible, you could either be open about the fact that, like, if I had to do this in a class, I'd probably say the computer will do the guessing for me based on the grouping that you've done. I might even project this calculator and come up with a prediction. Or if you want to be a little more sneaky about it, maybe you can load up the calculator on your mobile or something and, keep it on a podium or whatever, and then quickly read off the, this is no different than having the color pattern index printed out or written out and referring to it. It's morally the same level of cheating. So it's not too bad. I think you can, especially if you have a place where you can keep something. It's just that for this, I don't see how a pen and paper index would work, I think, because it's going to be messy to look up a grouping signature. So I don't think writing it out in an index card is feasible. But if you have a program like this handy, which can run from your mobile, I think that is quite reasonable. So that can make it a performable trick, I think. So of course, if you're brave and you want to memorize it, there's also a practice calculator here. So I want to improve this in a couple of ways. One is, of course, to make the calculator work. Right now, the cuts are not like, it only highlights this. I want the cut to actually rearrange the deck. It doesn't do that for me yet. The other thing I want to do is, this is based on my sequence is hard-coded into this program. And like I said, it's a stupid sequence. You could come up with a much more random one. So I would like for you to have the ability to enter your own sequence. And for this program to verify, first of all, that it's a valid sequence, you get all the group signatures at all the cuts. And once it's verified that it's valid, both the practice as well as the reveal prediction, both of them work with respect to your custom sequence. So I'll see if I can make those changes. If you have any other suggestions for how it would be useful to make an interactive around this trick, please let me know. But for now, this is what I have in mind. So I think we're done with the first part of this. For the second part, I actually don't have too much to say, except for, like I said, there's some really nice combinatorics. So they talk about the binomials and choose k. And here is like a concrete question. So given n and k, two parameters, find a sequence of length and choose k consisting of symbols from 1 to n such that each consecutive group of k contains a different k subset. Okay, so just to make that a little easier to follow, suppose n equals 8 and k equals 3. Then you're looking for a 56 length sequence, and this is one example, which has the property that no matter where you go, and you look at a group of k, in this example, a group of size 3, like you basically generate all the 56 different 3-sized subsets of 8 with wraparounds, of course. So this, you'd have to account for 4, 7, 8 and 7, 8, 2 as you think about this. So yeah, this is a universal sequence in the sense that it captures all the combinations. It turns out that it's not always possible to do it, and there's a nice argument for when it's impossible, and it's not clear. It's not clear if this is a characterization. So their point is, they argue this with an example, but I think I can tell you in general terms. Okay, so think about, like, when you're trying to do it with n and k, think about the number 1, okay? How many k-sized subsets does 1 appear in? That's going to be n minus 1 choose k minus 1, because I'm committed to keeping 1. I have k minus 1 spots left from which these are sets, there are no repetitions, so the universe is of size n minus 1. So there are n minus 1 choose k minus 1 sets in which 1 must appear. So if you think about it, like the number of places where 1 appears, how many, so for example here, if I have a 1 here, I have this 3-sized set, I have this 3-sized set, and I have this 3-sized set. So every occurrence of 1 gives me, it gives me k sets. Like I can start from k minus 1 places behind me, that'll be 1 set, and then k minus 2 and so on. And I come to the place where 1 occurs, that's the last k-sized set that I will see. So every occurrence of 1 gives me k sets. So the number of occurrences of 1 times k must be n minus 1 choose k minus 1. So if k does not divide n minus 1 choose k minus 1, you simply cannot do this, because we know this to be true, that every occurrence of 1, or any number for that matter, must give you, like, that multiplied by k must give you, like, if you're going to see everything exactly once, that product is n minus 1 choose k minus 1. So this condition is definitely necessary. So k dividing n minus 1 choose k minus 1 is a necessary condition. If it doesn't divide n minus 1 choose k minus 1, it's not clear that you can actually do it. So I think the state of the art is that you can do it for all n, and values of k up to 6 is what was known at the time of this writing. So first they figured it out. So k equal to 2 they already knew, k equal to 3 somebody came up with, and actually this somebody being Brad Jackson, and then Glenn Hurlbert showed it for k equal to 6, and then I think they collaborated and also fixed k equals 5. It's not clear to me. Once again, I have not had a chance to look this up, but I think for larger k, we don't know. So of course, when I say all n, don't really like all n for which the necessary condition holds. So for all n such that n minus 1 choose k minus 1 for whatever k actually is divisible by k. Okay, so these are universal sequences where you see all subsets of a certain size. So all the combinations show up. It's interesting on their own right. And now I'm going to basically confess to skipping this last part. I mean, I looked at it, but they have yes. So the question is, now that you know that these sequences exist, can you build a trick around it? And they actually say that they offer a couple of ideas, but I think it's mainly one thing that they do, and it's not really with a regular deck of cards either. I think because it's 56, you have to prepare a special deck of 56 cards with these symbols and so on. And the thing about the trick is that it involves going back and forth with a computer, doing a lot of dealing, a lot of steps, and then finally something presumably magical happens. So I will say that when I read this, I think I was able to follow like the narrative, but I haven't really I haven't really tried to either implement it or think through any examples or cases. It just felt like, okay, maybe this happens and this happens and then this happens. And then there is an impressive prediction or pattern at the end. But it's with, like I said, I mean, definitely welcome you to look at it if you think. I think one of the open-ended questions here is, can you make this a little more accessible? Because I think this will involve a little bit of programming to take care of all the cases that's happening and so on. So, so yeah, basically, I'm not going to get into a discussion of this particular trick, but I think the nicer thing to probably take home, possibly this trick as well, but the bigger question here is like, can you come up with a nice trick based on the fact that these universal sequences exist? In particular, the fact that you have a 56 length sequence of consisting of symbols from 1 to 8, which is such that all the 8 choose 3 sized, all the 8 choose 3 subsets of size 3 show up everywhere in the sequence. So given that you have such a universal sequence, can you use it to design a nice trick? So that's I think, the open-ended question. Um, and now I think they like the final remark here is they have, again, this is like more of an open-ended question to think about. So they're asking, does a sequence of 5601 symbols exist such that each consecutive group of 8 contains 3 ones and their left to right positions run through each possible 3 subset just once? And I think this they point out is not possible. I Yeah, I don't know if I fully parsed the sentence well, so I will not try to sort of get into this. But the open-ended question here is, can you arrange to have all the 3 subsets and 4 subsets appear just once in a deck of 126 cards? Um, Again, yeah, so this is some sort of a simultaneous universal thing where you want, yeah, I guess you're reading. Yeah, so they're saying 8 choose 3 plus 8 choose 4. So maybe what they mean is, so one thing that I'm not sure about is, once you have 126, a deck of size 126, you have 126 reads. I guess you can decide which of these reads are going to be of length 3 and which are going to be of length 4, because I think you need to allow for the lengths of the reads to be different if you're looking for 3 and 4 size subsets. So that's yeah. So I guess, and again, it's not clear if, like, I think combinatorially, it's of course a nice question, but it's not clear that having, like, even if there was such a sequence, that it could be the engine of a trick. It's not clear if that would be the case. So from a magic point of view, I don't know if the motivation is as strong. But combinatorially, of course, it's a very natural question to ask in this context. The 0-1 pattern, again, I was tempted by that line of thought because it took me back to color patterns and red, black cards and so on. And so I was wondering if something interesting happens there. And I think basically, initially I thought, to be honest, I thought that this is the same as the previous question because, like, essentially bit strings of length 8 correspond to correspond very naturally, like bit strings of length 8 with exactly 3 1s correspond very naturally to 3 sized subsets of 8, and maybe that's exactly why they've brought this up. So it seemed like morally, if you can capture all the 8 sized subsets in a string with 8 symbols, then seemed like, okay, now of course you're more constrained with the symbols. So it seems like, yeah, so it's kind of interesting that with a binary encoding, you cannot actually pack everything in. I don't know if the point that they're making about the fact that um, the sequence has to be periodic, and that's why we don't have enough room. I have to think about this a little bit. I'm not completely sure if I follow that remark, but it's interesting that with a binary encoding, you cannot compress and capture all this information in 56 bits, but with 8 symbols and reads of size 3, you can actually do it. And again, they do, yeah, in principle, they do have a trick based on that sequence, but that's something that I'm going to skip on the details of, and I will leave you to it to pursue this more closely if you're interested, or possibly think of your own trick based on the existence of this 56 length sequence with 8 symbols. So that basically brings us to the end of this discussion around card tricks that are the commonality being that you have a preordained deck. Um, you can cut to your heart's content, but at the end of it, the question is like, what kind of information from the top, how many cards gives you enough masala to be able to completely deduce and to completely predict the cards that have come up. So you've seen a few examples. Just to recap, the first thing we saw was 5 cards in a color pattern. The next thing we saw was 5 cards and low, middle, high patterns within them. Then we saw 3 cards and their arrangement plus the color pattern. Then we said, oh, this is the thing that I stopped with yesterday, and I said it's a nice exercise to figure out. But then we basically said 3 cards, the first person reveals the number, second person reveals the suit. With that much information on 3 cards, you can predict all 3 of them. And today we saw this effect, which had groupings based on suits. So you have 5 cards. You group people with the same suit together, thinking of the Joker as a suit of its own, and that's enough information to reveal everything. So you've seen at least 5 different effects, not counting this last one, which is subsets of size 3 in a 56 length deck. So that's basically all the tricks based on universal sequences, and presumably you could also come up with your own. And some really nice combinatorics along the way. And in particular, Euler walks on graphs is, I think, a thing that was a repeatedly useful tool in many contexts. So that was some fairly nice math. And for many of these other universal sequences, I think it's very open-ended if you have these systematic, efficient algorithms that generate the sequences. So if anybody wants to dig in further into that, I think it'll make for some very nice explorations. Okay, so just for the sake of completeness, if we have a couple of minutes, I'll just complete the discussion about this trick that we saw yesterday. So the value of the first person's card, the suit of the second person, and no information from the third person. So maybe you've had a chance to think about this, or if you don't want spoilers, you should probably turn the volume down for a couple of minutes, because I'm just going to quickly tell you how this trick is performed. So again, you're working with a full deck, okay? And this is actually a much easier trick to perform than the one that we just saw with the groupings from a memorization, etc. point of view. So essentially, they have this 8 kings order, which is, I think this is nice mnemonic. Don't know if this is like, should I zoom in a little more? So 8 kings threaten to save 95 queens for 1 sick knave. I think this is a well-known ordering among cards people. So this is how the values are organized. but you don't, yeah, so and then you're going to do the suits in like clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds. So you start off with 8 of clubs, king of hearts, 3 of spades, and 10 of diamonds, and keep doing that. So it's a cyclic pattern. At some point you get rid of 13, and then you repeat the whole process another 3 times, and this will give you an entire ordering of the 52 cards. Okay. And once you know that the first spectator has, for example, an 8, and the other person tells you that they have a heart, you know that heart ke piche it's a club, so you know that the 8 must have been a club. And here you know that 8s are always followed by kings, so you know that the person with the heart has a king. And at this point, you basically know where you are in the sequence. So this must have been like a 3 of spades. So that's, I thought that this was actually, compared to all the other stuff we've seen, this was really cute and simple. And I think this chased order with the 8 kings, I think it's also, I don't know if it comes up in this book, but this is something that's useful for like a couple of other effects that I'm aware of. So maybe we'll actually see this cyclic sequence again. But for now, I think this is something that I think is easy to perform end to end. It's also easy to, like, if somebody hands you a deck and asks you to perform a trick, I think you can just go away for 5 minutes and arrange the deck in this order, carry this order in your head, and come back and perform it. I think this one's probably, among all the 5 or 6 effects that we have seen across these 3 chapters, I think this one's probably the most accessible one from a performance point of view. And from the math point of view, also, the argument is very clean and elegant. So, yeah, so that's probably a good place to conclude our discussion about things based on universal cycles, deBruijn sequences, etc. And starting tomorrow, I think we continue to be like slightly ahead of schedule, and we are, I mean, this is a really silly way of keeping track, but in terms of the number of pages, we are about halfway through our journey. So we said we are going to do the first 7 chapters, which focus on card tricks. So we're currently about at the halfway mark. So we're going to come back and look at the Gilbreth principle, and we're going to look at some properties of shuffles as we go through the next 3 chapters. So thanks so much for hanging in there and being around. Hopefully, see most of you back tomorrow for a discussion of Gilbreth. And before we leave, if anybody has any comments, feedback, questions, please let me know, or please just feel free to text me anytime. I know I haven't updated the website in a while. I'm going to just clean up the last few things that I've tried to code up, and I will post an update on the WhatsApp group as soon as the recent interactives are available. Okay. All
So
right.
just had one question, maybe.
Yes.
So the initial trick, the bell number of 5 was 52, right? So
Right.
maybe they've done for 52 cards. For example, if we wanted to think from a performance perspective, we can
Right.
make it for 4 because 4 all of a sudden looks like it is 15.
Right. Good point. Yeah.
So maybe that's like a warm up where we can
Yeah, and it might be easier to remember.
easier
That's
to
a
do.
that's a very good point. I actually tried to do this for the other trick, which had so remember yesterday we did this low, medium, high, and color patterns. So I think I found it much easier to work out the so okay. It's probably not impressive as a performance, but if you do it for 2. Um, so basically, instead of looking at windows of length 3, where you have 8 possible color patterns and six possible sequences, if you do it for 2, it's either the first card is bigger or smaller. So it's basically only 2 permutations, and you have 4 color patterns, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. So you basically get 8 cards, and actually it was nice to just work out the whole sequence. You can come up with, so you can take the aces and twos from all the suits and build up a sequence. And essentially, yeah, I think it may not be very impressive. You have to ask the person with the bigger number to stand to the left, the smaller number to stand to the right, and you'll have to ask them for their colors. So the person who has a red, please come forward. but then you can predict the cards. The only thing is, because it's only 8 cards, I don't know if it's impressive. But the trick that we started with, Baby Hummer, had 4 cards, and that was still impressive and fun. So maybe even this baby version of yesterday's trick is not bad. And I think you're absolutely right in that spirit. Doing 15 cards, I did not realize that the bell number of order 4 is 15. For 3, it is, yeah, for 3, we saw that it's 6, which is probably a little too small. 15 seems like a good sweet spot. So it'll be nice to, I'll see if I can work out like concrete details for 15 as well while we're at it. We'll have to come up with the sequence. I think that's the main thing. We'll have to come up with the sequence where, so it's probably good practice to also think about the math. Like, how did they come up with that skeletal pattern? I have no idea. They mention Hamiltonian cycles. I was trying to think about in what sort of a graph were they looking for a Hamiltonian cycle. Wasn't very clear to me. So I think it'll be nice to brainstorm that. So it's an excellent point. So yeah, so this is like a nice thought exercise for all of us. We can try to work this out completely for 15, including the suit pattern, as well as, once you have the suit pattern, then you can come up with any number of sequences. But the coming up with the suit pattern of just to be sure, coming up with a suit pattern on 15 cards, so that when you pull out 4 cards, you see all the possible groupings of 4 cards. I think that's what we want to do. Nice thing is, it's only 4 suits, so you don't have to do this joker business as well. Everything will just work out. So that's a good thing. So yes, Vinod, maybe we can catch up offline and try to actually work out the sequence. It'll be nice.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Yeah, Akash. So emoji Uno, yeah, I somehow have a whole pack in my office. So I've never played with them, but it was useful for today. So okay, all right. So I guess this is maybe a good place to wrap up. We are getting close to being on the hour. So see you tomorrow back for Gilbreth